Of the Land Purpose Forum. This is 6 out of the 12 sessions that we've been running since the day before yesterday, the 17th, 16th. And today we will be discussing on the financial models, looking at the financial models. How do we finance projects for progressive land stewardship? And my name is Felician Komu. I live in Tanzania, Dar es Salaam. I used to teach at the University, but now retired, and I'm running a private practice called Majengo Estates. And really, my experiences in real estate, in housing, research, and land administration. I've been working with a number of organizations as a consultant, as a member, a professional member. I was with the African Research Society for quite some time, since 2001. And at one time, I was its president between 2006 and 2009. I've also worked with the International Financial Standards. I was a board member in the years 2001 to 2004. And I do quite a bit of research on housing, on real estate, and the latest was the rental housing study that I did for the Center for Affordable Housing Finance in Africa. Now, today, first I take this opportunity to welcome everybody, viewers and my colleague. And our agenda is simple. It's simply really how can we finance, what can we do to finance the community, the real estate, the towards progressive land stewardship. And maybe in between, perhaps when my colleague comes to then starts after his introduction, we'll look at what it is that we're looking at, it land stewardship, what it is, and what finance models are there. The aim is, at the end of the day, we want to realize a fair, a just society in terms of the land, access to land for housing. Now, maybe I ask Emil to introduce yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Emil. I'm the financial director for FICA. I also, as Felician, I have a background in other kinds of services. I was a consultant for almost 25 years in the very traditional consulting market, Big Five. I worked for Deloitte, for Ernst Young, etc., in large-scale projects. And since 2005, I decided to shift a little bit to a more social perspective in terms of doing consulting and research. I returned to the university and I did a degree in philosophy and then a master's in history. So this is more or less my background. In 2015, I was invited by Renato Simbalista, who is a professor from University of São Paulo Architecture Department, to join FICA. FICA is the first private-owned community owner of real estate in Brazil. It's the first experience. I can tell you that until today is more or less the single one who has this kind of model that we are using. The model of having a collective ownership of property and to use this property to try to take out of the market speculative rents, which means as almost all countries, renting housing in Brazil is expensive, renting houses, and our perspective is interesting because we are not we are not aiming the really low income part of the society. This part needs to be addressed by the government because of the quantity, the numbers of people in this situation. We have a series of projects, government projects, to try to address this, but our aim is in the, let's say, low middle class part of the society, people who make in our scheme of money from 1 to 3 minimum wages a month, which are the people who cannot enter in these government projects and don't have money to rent at market prices. So this was our first and still is our goal in terms of business. We started so in 2015 as a purely operation based on donations. So we still have this part of this is still one of the major parts of our business. People who donate money via crowdfunding from $5 a month to $300 a month. We have this money on a bank until we can get sufficient money to buy a new apartment. With this scheme, we have already bought 2 apartments and we are on the market for the third apartment. So this is as you can see, this is a very small model, but the idea is to be a laboratory uh, uh, and to be a place to nurse another initiatives like in other cities, in other parts of São Paulo, which is it's almost a country. We have only São Paulo has 20 million people living in the metropolitan area, so you can imagine the quantity of people with housing issues. And so, as a laboratory, we already have two different groups using our scheme of business to implement their model in 2 different cities of Brazil. One is Campinas, which is a city of 1.5 million inhabitants, who is more or less 1 hour from São Paulo. The other is Curitiba, which is the capital of another province, which is 1 hour flight from São Paulo. So this was our first model. From 2020, we received a grant from a Swiss foundation to start to build another model, which is a kind uh, of investment model, a social investment model of renting apartments, which means that people put the money in an investment, which is not a market investment. It's, let's say, low rates of uh, it's you will not receive the same amount of money as if you put in stock market, etc. But they still receive some money for it. And with this, we will need to buy apartments or houses to solve another problem in Brazil, which are the tenement houses. Houses, 10 to 20% of the inhabitants of São Paulo live in tenement houses, which are normally in very bad situation. People live 20 families in a house with two WCs, with 2 lavatories. And our idea is to, with this investment, to try to create a high quality standard of living for people who are used to live in these kinds of houses. People who rent not apartments, but they had rooms in apartments. We already have 2 apartments, two houses in this model, and we also are going. We are on a market to buy the third one. So this is more or less our basic scheme of work. Back to you, Felician.
Uh, Thank you. It's interesting. Sao Paulo, 20 million people, and 20% of these are living in tenements, and you say they are crowded. Are they room latings? You're talking about um, uh, what's the size of a unit in the tenements?
You can go from you have from no window no window rooms with 4 square meters, 40 square feet, to uh, 20 meters, 20 square meters, 200 square feet. But
Wow.
what is interesting is that tenement houses in Brazil are the most valuable investment, more than stocks, etc. Because a family that rents an apartment of, let's say, 20 square meters can pay the same of a legalized house in the same neighborhood. The question is that the people, they don't have warranties, so they need to live in these kinds of apartments because they don't have people who warrant the rent for them. And I really don't know the word in English. In English, is fiadori, someone that signed for them that if they don't pay the rent, this person will pay. So as they don't have this, they don't have credit. They need to pay 2 or 3 times the average rent to be able to live in a place and not in a slum. Okay, it's this medium level between a, let's say, a quality apartment and a slum.
Yeah. So you wouldn't say because you initially said you are not focusing on low income people. You are actually on the middle end to low to high end. Now in this tenement, and you say tenements actually, like you get the returns almost similar to the ones that we could expect on the stocks. Would you then would you say tenements are also getting attractive as an investment to the developers?
Yeah, yeah.
And
It is interesting for developers because you probably will be able to rent uh, rooms in a tenement with a good condition. For instance, last week we saw a tenement house uh, which is not low level tenement house. It's not a luxury house, but let's say people have rooms. They have a bathroom every three rooms. Uh, uh, it's an okay house, and the
this is
man
okay.
makes
Yeah.
the owner makes like at least 1% a month of income.
Okay. And are these low rise building or are they also high rise? The tenements.
No, no, no. We're talking about
Low rise.
working class neighborhoods
Okay.
near the downtown. This is a question. If you want a good house in São Paulo, paying a low income, you will need to be 1 hour, 1 hour drive from downtown, where are mostly of the jobs.
Hmm.
So this is the question. If you want to live in downtown near the jobs, you need to pay a lot or to enter in a tenement house. So we are not talking, Felician, we're not talking of low income people. For instance, the first family that we put in our project, the tenement house, they, let's say, the main question is not the money. The main
Hmm.
question is that they are immigrants.
Hmm.
So they don't have local people who guarantees their rents in a regular house. You understand? So they don't have their families are all outside. They are in Bolivia, in other countries. So they are from Bolivia. So in this sense, they need to opt for the tenement houses as a solution to work near their jobs and near the community. For instance, all the Bolivian community lives more or less in a 1 square mile around from where is our tenement house, where our first tenement house.
Can I come back on who owns the land upon which these tenements are built? Who owns the land?
Our, ourselves,
Uh-huh.
FICA.
How did
FICA
you
is
get?
a,
How did you get the
excuse me,
land? How did you
we
get the
buy,
land? You
we
bought
buy
it.
the,
Uh-huh.
we bought. In the first case, it was a person connected to FICA. He was not a donor. He's not a donor, but he's a family from a donor. He offers us the house, and we bought. We refurbish it. We change all the electric scheme because people tend to work in these tenement houses also. For instance, this special collectivity of Bolivians. They are in the government business, so they sew. They have sewing machines, and in the regular tenement houses, for you to have an idea, they sew in the same room where they live. So children have a lot of problems with schoolship because they can't sleep because the parents sewing until they sew until midnight, so we created a new project where families has their individual rooms. The let's say the working area is totally separated. They have a bathroom, each 1.5 families, so 2 bedrooms for a 3-room apartment. We changed the lights, we changed the gas system, the all the utilities. So we created let's say a sufficient place for work and live and have leisure in the same place where people probably lived very bad in the past.
Yeah, but before I share my experiences in Dar es Salaam or Tanzania, I would like you to like give us a kind of an overview of the land access to land for the people in Sao Paulo. Uh, is it a serious problem to get land? How much does it cost? Is it you know what I
It,
mean? Hmm?
yeah, let's say it's if you go to the traditional market, it's
Mm,
expensive. Our
mhm,
strategy was to start to look for old houses. For instance, we are now in the process of buying a third tenement house, which is a very old house, at least 1 century, with a lot of problems. And for instance, in this case, the land has 20 owners. It was the
mm,
house of the grandfather, then that it went to the children and then to the grandchildren. So
it's
now it's
inherited land.
completely crazy. And the guys cannot sell this land to other people. Why? Because nobody will buy it. It is a problem. As we are talking about long-term ownership of the land, we are not
Mhm,
trying to buy to resell it in the short time. So we can buy it. We can buy it and we can pay for this land a price which is half of the price of a totally regular house with all
mhm,
papers in 100% situation with the government. We have time to wait to them to put the land in a regular to fill all the needs of the government and housing associations, etc. So this is a strategy to buy uh, under the market land
mhm.
to
So
be able with the same with the same, let's say, quantity of money, with the same amount of money, to buy more properties.
and then the other
Okay.
question is how do you get the money? I know you had a grant from Swiss, but if a
We
developer or the
no no
local government, how
we
do they get
open
money to finance?
we open a kind of investment. It cannot be called as investment because
Mm,
if you call as investment, you need to open a kind of bank, you need to
mhm,
enter the regulatory bank system of Brazil. So together with lawyers, we created a scheme where what happens in Brazil, if you if you borrow money from a person below a certain rate, which is in the
mhm,
moment is 4% a year, it's not considered a bank investment. So we created a one-to-one contract where we we have the compromise to repay these people every 6 months, 1/20th of the money that they invest. Uh, we have at the moment 28 investors. The money is sufficient to buy two more tenement houses. So this is people who is interested in the experience. This is not, let's say, this is not their main money. This is not their retirement money. They said, I will seed you with, as an example, for instance, the lowest, the minimum value for invest in Brazil in our project is 10,000 reais. 10,000 reais nowadays is $2,000 more or less. Okay, 2,000 US dollars. It's a lot of money, but it's not so much money if you think of a person that has an average. It's more or less the average income of a lawyer, a monthly, or an engineer, etc. So this is people who already have traditional investments, but they want to, let's say, to be patrons on a kind of business like ours. You understand? So in the end, they invest really 1 or 2 or 3% of all their net assets to be patrons, to give us the possibility of explore this model, because they believe in our model.
I
Uh,
mean, we talking about what models, how can we finance for progressive land stewardship, and we may not have defined what is stewardship, particularly for our viewers. But maybe we look at that one. What is it that is concerns us? What are we? Why are we discussing this? And I don't know whether you have some experience from the local or government or public, because these are the ones that actually are looking towards developing, maintaining stable communities, developing, having communities that they are self-determination, they have self-determination, they can decide for themselves. They use like the cost of tenement, process of crowding already mentioned, but how efficiently are they using this as a piece of land and the buildings on it? This is a resource. As a tenement, as you mentioned, there could also be a question of they're it's overcrowding. You're buying them off so that you can then build. There'll be displacement, and who then will finance the displacement, and there are many things. And as stewardess, who if you wanted a local government or maybe public, that could be public in many cases, not necessarily, I suppose, but those who can like protect the communities, ensure that the poor guys are also brought on board, so that because housing is a basic need, right? And we cannot. So how do we, or how FICA also help to provide home ownership support, can give support to the people to own their houses. But where will you get the money? So the core question is, what models, what finance? Yes, you can borrow, but you cannot borrow that cannot be self-sustaining. Because you borrow, then there's a higher cost to it. And then I remember you talking to no, you borrow up to a certain level, otherwise then you have a problem with the banks and so on. Back to you.
uh, Look, Brazil has a very strong tradition
Mm,
of houses being, of having an apartment or a house or land as the main, let's say, the main investment. So the first thing that a person wants to buy in Brazil is it's a house. So this is why the government created in the times of the Workers' Party, they created Minha Casa Minha Vida, my house, my life, which was a project of selling houses, tons and tons. They sell like 2 or 3 million houses in a period of 5 to 10 years, and this was houses built for really low income people.
mm,
But what we say is that this solves the problem in some parts of our country. When you go, let's say, when you go to large cities like São Paulo, Minha Casa Minha Vida was only able to build apartments in in the outskirts of the cities. So they didn't solve the question of mobility. So people could own a house, could own a property with low interest rates, etc., but still not solving the question of mobility. So when we're talking about this, we're talking about people who bought an apartment in the outskirts, 25, 30 miles, 40 kilometers from where they work, and they still spend 4 hours a day commuting, cars,
Was
buses, subway. So, okay, you gave them their property, you solved this part, but you didn't solve a main issue, which is quality of life. You know what I mean? So, what happens is downtown Sao Paulo, because of legal issues and some kinds of problems, is very deteriorated in two senses. Old apartments that went to invent to uh, uh, testments, and old houses that don't pay, buildings that don't pay government taxes for 30, 40 years. So we have a stock of land and properties in downtown that could solve the the housing situation, even to sell apart this housing to people. But what happened is that our judiciary system makes the effort of the government to take this land from people, from owners who don't pay taxes for 30, 40 years, a nightmare. It's almost impossible. It's almost impossible. So this is why in Brazil the housing movements, the no, movimento do sem terra, the movement of the no owners of land, is so strong, because you have let's say 300, maybe 300,000 apartments in São Paulo which are totally abandoned. And as the government cannot find a solution, you need people invade between commas. They make use of the constitution and say land is a right ship,
this
is
is
a
right
right of the.
story.
Okay, so what FICA wants to do is to show that there is another possibility who pass through this question of legislation, which is, let's say, uh, if you donate some money, if you invest some money, we can start to sit and to show to other people that it's possible to make some profit. It's not, let's say, the best profit of all, a higher profit, but you can make some profit in this market in the downtown area, renting apartments, renting
Yeah.
houses.
Um, you've
Can
raised
you
a number of
explain?
issues. Hmm? Just go.
Can you explain me a little bit about your model?
Yeah. Sorry.
Can you explain me a little bit how Mayengo states work?
Yes. Yeah, but before I do that, I just want to come back to your the issues that you raised, particularly
Mhm.
that you are developing houses a little bit far away, so the commuting costs are high. So actually, at the end of the day, you're bringing the question of affordabilities. Let's say some expenditure on the housing, but which has to include transportation. So when it comes towards the end, perhaps this is we have to pick this. This is one of the issues that is coming up. You also mentioned the question of people abandoning apartments, and perhaps then we might pick it from there. Well, that said, um, um, from our perspective, and I speak from the point of view of the city of Dar es Salaam, and we have a serious problem as well in terms of housing. We have large part of the urban population lives in unplanned areas, informal areas. And we do not have free roads titles like you have. So the government owns the land, or the president is a custodian. He owns the land, and you get a lease from the government, and then you develop that piece of land. So we have, and that land is then planned, surveyed, and so on. But for a few, it's about less than 20 to 30% of the land is actually planned. The rest is unplanned. So you have people building the way they, they're fending from themselves. They are constructing from their personal savings, self-built, and they don't follow any particular uh, building code. So at the end of the day, these areas tend to be highly congested, poorly serviced, and so. So the government has a number of schemes. They started housing schemes. Some targeting, special targeting on the poor people. The poor people here now, we have a problem defining. We find them, the people who are, the target is actually those who are employment, but get a small salary. Now, the bulk of the population is not salaried, and therefore you are only looking at the small portion of the population which is unemployment. And so we have asked a number of projects, some funded by the World Bank, and those that were funded by the World Bank, for the poor man, you give him a piece of land, you put in, you help him to get some funding so that he can build, and then at the end of the day, he sells this to another middle end or high end person. So, and I think our topic today is to addressing these stewards, the people, the community which that protects, ensures that these efforts of affordable housing schemes, they don't get, we don't they get lost to the market. The markets, because people, those who rich, they buy off the poor. And those are the things. We have um, uh, some a model that we use, and unfortunately not that comprehensively, is the housing cooperatives. This just like the Americans, the limited equity housing cooperatives. I think we also I saw some, maybe in Sao Paulo you have some. And these ones are individuals who take their own effort and they organize themselves, buy land, and then they, with that land, they can pledge it to a bank, and then they get loans, individual loans to develop. So that it's the cooperative that owns the land, but individuals own the buildings, and they have a loan for those buildings. We also have now moved to, we didn't have a commercial or house loans or mortgage loans. So people, you couldn't go to a bank and borrow money to buy a house. Um, uh, but today, for the last 10 years, we have moved from that. We have now have housing financing companies, banks, particularly commercial banks. They are giving loans to people. So something is happening at that end. One more thing that perhaps, I don't know whether you, the other presentations, there was a big talk on community land trusts. And the community land trust is also another financial model that can be used. And there you actually transferring. And I don't think FICA would fit in that one, because I see FICA more for, you're actually targeting the middle and the high income. And but this is also a possibility. People like those in the tenements, they could get organized. They have their own leadership. They look for more land, then they can then move around and like secure money, or they can actually through their own savings they can get money. And then their only concern now is how to protect one another. If you already have a home, how do you protect yourself from so that you don't get some rich person come and buy one of your members' housing? I think so. The challenge is that we have, actually, we do share them in a way, like we have a very um, uh, the emphasis in the housing here is people will want a plot of land and they will individual plot and build on it. So it's not like a compact housing. It's individuals building one after the other, and at the end of the day, you have a horizontal sprawl of the city, and therefore the late comer to the city finds himself located far away on the peri-urban areas. So he has the commuting problem. So his housing cost is actually uh, his the actual cost of owning that house or the renting that house plus the cost of whether it's by bus or by motorbike, the cost of traveling costs. If you factor this, then you see that that unit that is outside the city is the most affordable to him. And so so the policy is moving towards more of apartment construction, compact, gated compounds, and there's a lot that is happening around on the ground now in the city like Dar es Salaam. So, and back to you. Maybe you should also tell us. Uh, you say FICA, you get you actually you're actually soliciting funding from other organizations. Do you have any experience with what the what's the support? You mentioned the other city. The other city is 1.5 million people. What's the name of the city? Sao Paulo is the big.
Campinas,
Yeah,
Campinas, Campinas
yeah,
is 1 hour more or less from São Paulo.
yeah.
We are,
Do they have
we
any
are.
housing scheme?
Excuse me.
Do they have any housing scheme that you are aware of? A housing scheme where they want to provide for the people.
Their scheme will be more or less the same as ours.
Mm-hmm.
Old houses, they already bought a house in the
Mm-hmm.
downtown of the city,
Mm-hmm.
and they will probably work in the same scheme of multi-family houses to substitute tenements, which is also a problem in their city.
Mm-hmm.
uh, Campinas is not so big, but it's a very, let's say, very spacious city because you have a small, it's not so small, but you have a small downtown and then only houses. So if you want, if you are not, if you don't have the income, you really need to live also 30, 40 kilometers from your work. So the basic idea of this group is also to buy a house, to buy lands, properties in the downtown, to have people who live very far away from their works, to have the opportunity to live in the downtown, which is not a question only of distance, it's a question of quality of services. The best
Mm-hmm.
schools are in downtown, the best hospitals are in downtown, universities, leisure, recreational centers. So, for instance, if you live in São Paulo, in the outskirts of the city, you will probably have to take a bus to go to a public club or to go to a hospital. You have one hospital each 10 kilometers. In the downtown, we have 10 hospitals in the old downtown,
Mm-hmm.
so you have a best offer of services. So this is also their idea in Campinas, and probably will be the idea of the group of Curitiba also, which is to buy. They first they are trying to buy a building, but also in the same scheme to find investors who are wishing to invest in a rate which is below the market traditional rate, but on the other hand, they have the satisfaction of helping improve the housing market in Brazil
Mm-hmm.
and to
Um,
experiment.
okay, thank you. Um, one other thing. Uh, any opinion on what could be done in Sao Paulo or this other city in terms of ensuring that uh, everyone has an equitable access to land with that kind of equitable access to land, is that be a concern? And if yes, what could be done?
Uh, uh, this is a very complicated question. I think this is a little bit out of our scope in terms of what we really want to be is to be a showcase in some sense. We know that even if we work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, we will not be able to address 1% of the market, the housing market problem in Brazil. So we want to be a laboratory to show to other people, to governments, etc., that it's possible to solve this the ownership the ownership of land question, if not in the short term, in the medium term, or in the long term. The current model will not solve the question. We have every day more and more people without access to land. Okay, so if we go in the direction that we are nowadays, we will not solve this problem in Brazil.
Um,
At least in large cities.
yes, it is. Okay. Um, do you know of any particular government projects that perhaps would also be interested in terms of FICA teaming up to solve housing building materials for those who want to self-build?
And we have a government line of rent of the government lends money to people in low interests to buy materials to build. Was a part also a part of Minha Casa Minha Vida, and let's say people already use these kind of lines of credit in the country, but also again uh, in this will not solve the question of large cities. Mainly, this is solving the question of, let's say, middle-sized cities where people have here in Brazil, middle-sized cities normally have a better quality of life in average than the large cities. So what happened was that when the government offered this line of credit, like 15 years ago, people start to buy a lot. I can give you an example. I don't know if you know Salvador. Salvador was the first capital of Brazil, and Salvador is also a large city, 3 million people. But there is a lot of cities in the outskirts. The cities were very poor, and you need to pass through the cities to go to the beaches of the northeast of the country. I went there 20 years ago. It was a mess 20 years ago, before that the government put this line of credit. For some reason, I went to spend my vacations again in this part of the country, and I passed through the cities like 5 years ago. You have like another situation, completely different situation, because everybody took their credit to buy materials or refurbish their houses. So the cities are much better in terms of the quality of construction. You have a lot of building material stores all around the roads near the cities. So I think that this is already in some sense solved in Brazil for at least a part of the problem. The main problem still is the large cities and the scarcity of land, and in opposition of a lot of abandoned places. So the city could be much more different if these places would transformed in apartments to be refurbished. The government of the city of São Paulo start a call. They put a call for a new project of refurbishment of at least 10 to 25, 15 to 25,000 apartments in the downtown. But by our experience, we see that this will take years and years and years, and probably in the end, you have at least at tops 1/10 of their desire of their original number of apartments built or refurbished.
Mhm.
If you know what
Yeah,
I mean. Yeah.
because I was going to ask you what are the challenges that you feel in terms of housing, and you seem to have answered that one as in a way. We mentioned that the big cities have problems, serious problems. I think you may have been referring to reflect on the urbanization, rapid urbanization, or too many people in the city, and you mentioned the scarcity of land. And they mentioned the question of abandonment, and the government is doing the refurbishment, is calling tenders for refurbishment, but they are not getting the best response. Now back to the abandonment. Why do they abandon the tenements?
Uh, they're not. We're not talking about tenements. We're talking, for instance, uh, commercial buildings in downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And normally this is a question of uh, uh, legalization problems of some apartment, a building who was from someone, and then the person died, and in the testament there were a lot of inheritance, and they don't want to pay the taxes, and this thing goes as a snowball, and 25 years later they have like 1 or 2 million dollars of debt with the government, and they don't want to pay, and the government puts an I don't know how to say this in English. The government say, well, if you don't pay me this money, we will pick this. The value of your property is less than the money that you owe us, and then
So
you
they
have
take it back.
but you have so many levels of justice in Brazil that this will take like years and years, because if you lose in the first round, you can go to appeals court, and then if you lose in the appeals court, you can go to superior court, and this can take decades. So the city of São Paulo only was able in 20 years to recuperate 3 or 4 buildings
Mhm.
in a universe of 1,000 or 2,000 buildings with the same problem, for your understanding. So it's uh, uh, it's almost impossible to solve this problem in a short term.
Any comment on the housing condition situation in Sao Paulo? Housing condition. What is the situation like? Do we have people who were not who do not have a place to sleep?
Uh,
Pavement areas, for example.
I'll say that from the one hand, if you make a pie chart from the 100% of the country of the city, 15% live in subhuman quality, 10 to 15% slums, really real slums. Uh, 15% live in tenements,
Mm-hmm.
and at least 20% of the people live with their families, in the sense of people who are supposed to have their own houses. And they have the same situation in Lima, in Peru. They take,
Mm-hmm.
for instance, a family have a one floor house. What they do? The children cannot buy a new house. They they create a second floor, normally an illegal amendment, and the family start to live in the second floor, the third floor, and so at least half of the population in São Paulo uh, do not have the best quality of housing that they will need to have.
Mm-hmm.
At least half. So we're talking about we're talking in the outskirts, in the conurbation of São Paulo, like at least 8 to 10 million people.
Yeah, it's a big
It's a
population.
lot. It's a lot.
How about the student accommodation, student housing?
Totally non-formal. Totally non-formal. University of São Paulo, for instance, has Uh, one has buildings for the students, but this is also, let's say, is not sufficient. So the university uh, gives the students who has no opportunity to access one of these apartments, they give some money which is not sufficient to rent uh, a room in a. So I can tell you that it's more or less the same situation of the whole city. People who cannot afford to rent an apartment, they will, to students who cannot afford to rent an apartment, or they live in tenements, or in a kind of tenements who be like a fraternity in the American sense, but it's not a fraternity.
Right.
They rent
Right.
a five room apartment, and everybody pays for this apartment. But in the end, the quality of life is also a sub quality of life. It's more
Yeah,
or
we
less
are
like
sharing
this.
similar experiences. Um, because we have students that they really have serious problems of housing, and unfortunately, the government does not have funds for, does not have provision for constructing a specific class of property for student accommodation, apart from the usual dormitories. Particularly when we have postgraduate students, then things are quite different. We have some few minutes left, but I'll get back to you. I'll get back to you. Does the government have a housing assistance, assistance or housing subsidy arrangement for different classes of people? No,
No,
you are
no
not.
formal. Not,
No.
not that I know. Not that I know. Not that I know.
Okay.
Uh,
So,
uh, uh, the only, let's say, the only large program in Brazilian housing universe was this Minha Casa Minha Vida, which is to sell houses for people with uh, in low in with low income, low interest rates. This was the only program.
so
The program of let's say São Paulo City has a program who pays for really low income people an amount of money monthly, which is to nowadays 300 reais, which more or less $60. This is not sufficient to rent a tenement room. So people normally, what they do, they enter, the whole family enter in the in the line of receiving this money to have in the end like $200, which will be sufficient to rent a room.
okay.
But it's
So
really complicated.
okay. So where do we go? What are the next steps? We have what do we have suggestions for the big city, the mega city, the Sao Paulo, in terms of getting something for the to get the people to put stable housing, home ownership. What can we do? What will be our suggestions on the issue that you mentioned on the this abandonment? And you also hinted people actually illegally extending their premises so that they can accommodate more people.
Yeah.
What do you think will be our contributions towards that? Maybe we'll get
Uh,
to the last minutes. What would be our views in terms of uh, addressing the this huge problem that you mentioned?
my main goal as financial director of FICA nowadays is to find a way to show to more people that they can have part of their investment in social projects in terms of with our culture. It's a little bit strange because differently from, for instance, United States, where you can deduct from your taxes all the donations until some level. Here in Brazil, you have only one specific kind of donation that can be deducted from your taxes. So people, if they go, they donate all to very charitable foundations, like people who make food to distribute in downtown, or they go to investments with a high rate, a high tax. So we are in the middle of in a kind of uh, what we are calling. It's not, let's say, 100% right, but we are calling a kind of venture philanthropy, which means it is philanthropy in some sense because you will not make the money that you will make as an investor, but on the other hand, you are entering in the venture capital market in the sense that you are addressing issues of the country that you live without having to donate this money. You will receive the money back. I always try to look to this platform called Kiva, which where you put money, you receive the money back, but you don't receive interest. So we are not Kiva and we are not a bank. We are in the middle. You put your money and you will receive some small interest. That is not to say you only give the money for a charity. You know, I think this will be the solution. The only way to expand our projects in a scale that will make some difference for the city. 100 apartments, 200 apartments. We have a plan to have in 5 years 100 families in apartments. So this will mean 15, 20 houses or apartments or buildings. But this is a drop in the ocean. Okay, so we really need to make the people pay attention and to create their associations also, to have 20, 30, 100 associations in our country with the same schemes to create moment, to have a moment. The question of generating entropy, okay? In the
Yeah.
sense of this is the only way, but this is a
Okay.
really long-term project.
Thank you. I think you hit it well. Venture capital, getting people, like mobilizing them so that they can also themselves, raise money. And this is like a fund, a revolving fund for them, so that at the end of the day they can we can realize housing is a necessity, is a human need, is a right, and for those who are actually doing the legal construction, they are not doing it because they want to. They want to do. They are not like they're doing for no reasons. It's because they need the accommodation. So
Mhm.
reorganizing the society so that they can actually uh, fend for themselves, set up their own community fund. And that's the only way we can help these families. We and to the viewers, we were looking at. We really wanted a discussion that leads us to setting up to assisting our communities towards accessing stable housing, affordable housing, support them for those who want to own housing, to oversee um, um, the society, to oversee issues like nobody is displaced, and if he has to be displaced, then he gets some fitting compensation to protect the security of tenure, to provide um, affordable housing, like Emil raised the issue because the land is not available, then they go far away and build quite far away, and then the commuting fees, the commuting costs, they will actually be factored in the cost in the housing. So the housing there is actually more as affordable as it were. I think with this one, Thank you everybody for attending, and thank you, Emil, for very detailed
My pleasure.
information. I know a lot now about Sao Paulo and the other city. And next time we will invite you to Tanzania. And
Okay, it will be a
we
pleasure.
have better
I'm.
problems. Yeah,
Uh,
we have the
uh,
weather is good. Yeah,
okay,
you are
it will be a
welcome.
pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
When the same wise, when São Paulo, when our COVID question finalizes, you are invited to visit us, to visit our
Yes,
properties.
we will.
Uh, it is very interesting. Thank you very much to having me here
Thank you very
this year.
much, and thanks everybody for coming to this session. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Bye.